The most famous Romans could often meet the most inglorious ends, starting with Remus's death at the hands of his brother Romulus, to Pompey's betrayal and assassination on a lonely Egyptian shore, Cicero's beheading, and the stabbing of the Emperor Geta in his own mother's arms. The shockingly violent deaths of many prominent Romans reflected well that even the elite were not immune from danger in an era when life was nasty, brutish, and short. In the volatile world of Roman politics, dangers were ever present, and those who lived by the sword, unsurprisingly, often died by it. For even a man who ruled over Rome and enjoyed widespread popularity among the poorer classes could be cut down by jealous senators. But Caesar was not the first Roman to suffer this fate. His famous end would actually mirror the death of Romulus, the man who, according to legend, founded Rome alongside his brother Remus, and who also had his life cut short by a senatorial plot, only, like Caesar, to rise again as a god. But before we examine the reasons for Romulus's death, we need to take a look at his life, or at least the legends and myths that provide our only real insight into the first decades of Rome after its foundation. Thus, even though many of the stories we are left with are unreliable and seem the product of later embellishment, this video will relay them to viewers more or less as they are relayed to us by our sources. Even the ancients themselves were skeptical of some aspects of the Romulus narrative, and recognized that there were contradictions in the myriad traditions that had been preserved. But on the whole, they accepted that he was a real individual, and even the most intellectually rigorous Roman historians felt there was a historical basis at the heart of the tale, and concrete facts that could be known about the man. Though modern scholarship differs significantly from this ancient assessment, the idea of some Romulus-like figure existing near the time period at which the legends place the foundation of Rome is at least a tenable position, and it is one we have defended in the past. Regardless of his actual historicity, however, the Romulus narratives must be well understood if we are ever to hope to penetrate the workings of the Roman mind, which did accept his historicity. Dismissing the Romulus mythos as ahistorical and refusing to probe deeper may work if our goal is the rote memorization of bare facts. But to truly know what made Roman society function and to perceive the values and preconceptions that underpinned it, one must at least make the effort to enter their mental framework on its own terms, even if, as moderns, we recognize the degree to which the legends do not stand up to our scientific scrutiny. A day may come when our own worldview appears irredeemably flawed, but we should hope that future historians do us the kindness of acknowledging that we are complex, multifaceted beings who, although limited by the mental landscape we have been born into, are still capable of rational thought and legitimate inquiry. But, as mentioned, it can be difficult to lay out a simple history of Romulus and his reign because of the contradictions that are present, not just between our sources, but within our sources themselves. So, this will by necessity be me painting with broad strokes. Romulus and his twin brother were supposedly the sons of Mars, and the grandsons of Numitor, a royal from Alba Longa, whose throne had been usurped by a treacherous brother. Sentenced to die by exposure, the infant twins were nursed by a wolf and raised by a shepherd named Faustulus, who found them. And Livy seeks to ground this tale in reality here by pointing out that the Latin slang for a prostitute was lupa, aka a she-wolf. Plutarch tells us that the boys had a royal character from their youngest days, and moved to depose their wicked uncle, Amulius, to restore their grandfather's throne. The boys then elected to found their own city, but could not decide whether to found it upon the Aventine or the Palatine Hill. What seems to us like a trivial disagreement, spiraled into greater conflict between the brothers that culminated in Romulus slaying Remus, perhaps for the crime of disrespecting the sacred border of the city where he was constructing a primitive wall. The Roman penchant for civil wars is here tragically foreshadowed in the feud between the twins. If you're enjoying this video, please do us a favor by liking, commenting, and subscribing. We're a small channel, and this is the only way to get the almighty YouTube algorithm to notice us. Furthermore, you can help Tribunate become more sustainable by becoming a member for as little as 99 cents a month. Thank you for all of your support. Romulus wasted no time consolidating power, and the city unsurprisingly took shape on the Palatine, his preferred site. A surge in construction during this era is attested in the archaeological record, though we cannot infer Romulus's historicity from this alone. As king, Romulus set the precedent for what a Roman ruler was supposed to be, an unflinching conqueror. Romulus had no qualms at all about using the sword to increase the size and influence of his new community. Nor was he above the subterfuge that Roman commanders would later view as unmanly. This is most evident in his orchestration of the abduction of the Sabine women. Romulus also embodied an important principle that later Roman monarchs of the imperial era were to learn quickly. Win the army over to your side and do absolutely everything in your power to keep them there. Great though Romulus was, he was better loved by the commons than by the Senate, and, best of all, by the army. During his reign, Romulus apparently governed as somewhat of a populist, favoring the masses over the established families with his policies. Unfortunately, even in the legends, the details of a nascent class conflict remain murky, as, despite the tension showing through, we are also told that the very patrician plebeian distinction was created by Romulus himself when he appointed the first 100 senators. Why would he lay the foundation for this division, only to side with the people? We cannot say for certain. But, befitting a man who led a life so shrouded in mystery, Romulus's death was perhaps the most puzzling part of his narrative, and hence at an early Roman community riven by class conflict. For 37 years now, Rome had been built, and Romulus had been its king, and on the 5th of the month of July, which day they now call the Capitine Nones, Romulus was offering a public sacrifice outside the city at the so-called Goat's Marsh, in the presence of the Senate and most of the people. Suddenly, there was a great commotion in the air, and a cloud descended upon the earth, bringing with it blasts of wind and rain. The throng of common folk were terrified and fled in all directions, but Romulus disappeared, and was never found again, either alive or dead. Upon this, a grievous suspicion attached itself to the patricians, and an accusing story was current among the people to the effect that they had long been weary of kingly rule, and desired to transfer the power to themselves, and had therefore made away with the king. And indeed it had been noticed for some time that he treated them with greater harshness and arrogance. This suspicion the patricians sought to remove by ascribing divine honors to Romulus, on the ground that he was not dead, but blessed with a better lot. The decision to cast the disappearance of the beloved King Romulus as the result of divine intervention seems far-fetched, even in a world dominated by superstitious thinking and a much closer conception of the relations between humans and the divine. Evidently, the plebeians did not find the tale particularly plausible either, as soon the senators had to produce one of their number to testify under a solemn oath that Romulus had in fact ascended to godhood. At this pass, then, it is said that one of the patricians, a man of noblest birth, and of the most reputable character, a trusted and intimate friend also of Romulus himself, and one of the colonists from Alba, Julius Proculus by name, went into the forum and solemnly swore by the most sacred emblems before all the people that, as he was traveling on the road, he had seen Romulus coming to meet him, fair and stately to the eye as never before, and arrayed in bright and shining armor. He himself then, affrighted at the sight, had said, "O king, what possessed thee, or what purpose hast thou, that thou hast left us patricians a prey to unjust and wicked accusations, and the whole city sorrowing without end at the loss of its father?" Whereupon Romulus had replied, "It was the pleasure of the gods, O Proculus, from whom I came, that I should be with mankind only a short time, and that after founding a city destined to be the greatest on earth, for empire and glory, I should dwell again in heaven. So farewell, and tell the Romans that if they practice self-restraint and add to it valor, they will reach the utmost heights of human power, and I will be your propitious deity Quirinus." These things seemed to the Romans worthy of belief, from the character of the man who related them, and from the oath which he had taken. This testimony is noteworthy for several reasons. First, because, unlike the initial attempt, it seems to have been successful, and suspicions were satisfied as a result of this respected man going on the record. But the intricacy and the details attached that may have made it appear legitimate to an ancient audience make it ring all the more hollow to modern readers. It seems like a classic case of "the lady doth protest too much," where we are left to wonder if a guilty senate only required such an elaborate explanation to cover for their misdeeds. In my eyes, at least, it makes the Senate look more guilty, not less. But the most fascinating aspect is the name of our patrician apologist, Proculus Julius. We don't know much else about him, or even if he was a real individual, but the name lets us know that he supposedly came from the Julian clan, and thus could conceivably have been the distant ancestor of Julius Caesar, a man who would die under shockingly similar circumstances nearly 700 years later. Like Romulus, Caesar died with a great deal of blood on his hands, and, like the city's founder, much of it was Roman. But the civil wars and Roman bloodletting did not end with Caesar's death. Rather, his assassination proved the pretext for another series of wars, and finally a complete revolution in Roman government, where Romulus's city on the Tiber again reverted to monarchy. And though Virgil proclaimed that Rome would have an empire without limit, the countless victories Rome enjoyed over foreign foes only highlighted the contradictions present at the very heart of the state. Its limits were not external. They were always found in the deficiencies of Roman character, and not in battlefield rivals. For the elimination of constraints and foreign opposition only gave the city, founded on fratricide, the opportunity to engage in civil war time and time again until it had squandered all it once possessed. Real or not, Romulus embodied the virtues that Romans aspired to, and we should not be shocked that those who idolized a man who killed his own brother would ever hesitate to take the life of another citizen. Rome had lived by the sword, and by its own swords would its death come. It would just be slower and more agonizing than any could have foreseen.